Hey, good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Jim Banks, and I wanted to welcome you to today's uh, show. Bear with me one second. Whoops. Um, yeah, so hi, I'm Jim. I'm Jim Banks. I wanted to welcome you to today's show. I'm really delighted to have an amazing guest, good friend of mine, Tim Ash, who is with me. Bear with me while I bring Tim in. This is the problem when you're one man producer, director, everything else, all at the same time.
Hey, Jim. Great to be with you.
How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. It's just early morning here in San Diego, and doing great.
Great. So what have you been up to? It's been an awful long time since we last saw each other physically. What have you been up to since then?
Well, most people know me for running Site Tuners and the Digital Growth Unleashed conference. I've actually, within the last couple of years, transitioned to just working on more evangelism. So I do a lot more international keynote speaking, mostly virtual these days. And then I just published my latest book called Unleash Your Primal Brain, Demystifying How We Think and Why We Act. And I've also put out a brand new Introduction to Neuromarketing course on LinkedIn Learning. So I've been a busy guy during the pandemic. So I do a lot more international keynote speaking.
Just bear with me, Tim. I've got a bit of an echo going on in my head here at the moment. I don't know if it's you or me or.
Book called Unleash Your Primal Brain, Demystifying How We Think and Why We Act. And I've also put out a new Introduction to Neuromarketing course on LinkedIn Learning. So I've been a busy guy during the pandemic.
You certainly have. Mind you, you've always been a busy guy. I think that's always one of the beauties of yourself is like you're always like one of the hardest working guys that I know in our industry. You've always been sort of like very active in that regard. But tell me, Tim, you recently keynoted an event in Orlando. How was that compared to kind of what it would have been like before?
That's right. Yeah, I was the keynote at Lead Generation World in Orlando, and it was held live around the 20th of March. So even for the US, that was still early days, but they committed to a live event. It was the first time I got on a plane. I wore an N95 mask the whole way. I wasn't vaccinated yet. I'm fully vaccinated now. And it was really good to be back. There was definitely social distancing, and it was elbow bumps instead of hugs. But other than that, it was just great to be around real people, to still do just the informal networking, as well as going out to dinners and stuff after the main events. So it was nothing like a live event. I think that we're all done with virtual Zoom meetings and webinars and virtual summits. That's a 70% experience, no matter how good the technology is. But in person is something that I think all people crave and we desperately want to get back to.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting. I've heard so many people some are kind of conflicted. I think a lot of people think that this what is going on now with these virtual conferences, they like it. They think it's the new norm. They think that that's the way that they want to do it in the future. And for me, I absolutely, I mean, I say I hate it. I don't hate it, but I really feel that I get so much more value out of physical face to face. And again, it's not just the actual meeting up with other speakers, watching other speakers, speaking myself. It's the networking that goes on, the parties, the dinners, all the sort of things that again, you and I have kind of had great times in Australia, in Vegas, right? And I think if we were only able to kind of do Zooms and Hangouts, I just don't think you get the same experience at all as a result of that.
Yeah, and I think it's also a matter of context. When you're in front of your computer, you're multitasking, you're probably checking emails, there's all of these distractions. And also just how long can you sit in front of your computer? I mean, I heard people that were doing 3-day live events, and they said, okay, we'll just do a 3-day virtual event. And I said, that's insane. If you expect me to be in front of my computer for 8 hours a day for 3 straight days, that's not going to happen.
Because you used to run your own event. I mean, did you kind of decide not to do it anymore? I mean, how is it kind of like the event being?
No, the event's still rock and rolling and going strong. Of course, outside of pandemic years. So it was called the Conversion Conference before, about conversion rate optimization. Of course, we relabeled it Digital Growth Unleashed, and it still goes on in the U.S., UK, and Germany every year. So it'll be back to in person as soon as that's possible.
When
But
do you
I'm
think
not
that'll be?
involved anymore. As I mentioned a couple of
Okay.
years ago, I
Yeah.
sold my stake in my agency Site Tuners to partners, as well as my involvement in the conference. So I'm focusing, as I mentioned, on the solo stuff, the evangelism, digital marketing, training, and education.
So Tim, tell us a little bit about your new book, because again, I've obviously read your landing page optimization book many times. I've donated it and gifted it to a few people in the past.
Yes, this is the second edition here.
Yeah. So I mean, obviously, that to me, that's almost like landing page Bible, right? That for me was like one of the most kind of defining books, because I always kind of maintain, people that are involved in media buying, buying media is not like a magic wand, right? You need to have a good kind of consumer experience, and that involves like a lot of work on landing pages and everything else. So tell us a little bit about kind of your new book. I mean, what's the context of the new book?
Yeah, well, the reason I decided to write it is because, as you mentioned, and thank you for your kind words about my book, it's kind of the Bible in the field, but it was focused strictly on online marketing and how to make websites more effective. And when I ran my agency, we created 1.2 billion in value for the Googles, Nestle's, and Expedias of the world. And most of that was based actually not on the technology, but on a really good understanding of psychology. So this book is about evolutionary psychology. Basically, is a very readable. It's not a heavy book to read. It's a overview of everything in the whole evolutionary arc that we took to get to where we are. So we picked up a lot of features and still share them with more ancient forms of life, and there are definitely some distinctly human things that evolved at the end. But I wanted to retrace that whole evolutionary arc so you could understand persuasion more broadly, why we act and why we do the things that we do. So this book is not aimed at marketers. It has really several audiences. You can be in it for personal development. It covers sleep, memory, creativity, relationships, stuff like that. You can also do it for various forms of business, marketing, sales, leadership. Basically, if you want to understand what all 8 billion people on the planet have in common, it's a great place to start. There's no technical jargon. It's a really fast, exciting read. And like I said, it works for personal development, relationships, and business. And if you read it with...
The thing I really like about the book is in terms of like the book itself, obviously you've written a physical book, right? But to promote and kind of like basically evangelize for the book, you've got your primalbrain.com website, right? Which has obviously got, the book, the mastermind, public speaking, right? So I guess there's kind of upsells on the back of the actual physical book itself, right? I mean, yes, you want people to buy the book, you want them to get involved in that, right? But obviously you're trying to then find additional opportunities to kind of talk to people that read the book, find it valuable, and want to kind of take things to the next level.
Yeah, that's right. I would say that the book itself is available in ebook format, audiobook narrated by me, which makes it a lot more fun, as well as the paperback worldwide. And if you're in Australia and New Zealand, you can get the Booktopia edition from my friend Tony Nash. But you're right. I think my main focus is still public speaking and corporate training and advisory around digital marketing. As you mentioned, I formed a new mastermind for marketing executives that want to understand their marketing better and use that to drive growth as well.
So what do you see the biggest challenges? I mean, obviously we've been through a pandemic, right? And I'm involved in buying media, right? And clearly a lot of the messaging kind of to end users was very different during a pandemic versus kind of like pre and post, right? And I think pre-pandemic we had a certain way of doing things. During the pandemic, certain way of doing things, and post-pandemic, I think some of the things that we might have done in the past, right, may well have changed as a result of the behaviors that people have adopted during the actual pandemic itself. I just was interested to kind of know what your thoughts were about what do you see being the kind of things that people will do now that maybe they don't have to do, will sort of do because it's become part of it's become ubiquitous to their kind of the way
Well,
of life?
I think the pandemic has forced us into isolation essentially and lockdowns of various strengths around the world. And that goes against our basic nature. I have a whole section in my book, several chapters entitled Hypersocial. We have a deep need to connect with others. In fact, not having strong social connections has been shown to have the medical equivalent of about being a 2-pack a day smoker in terms of your life expectancy. So you need strong connection. And like we were talking about, Zoom meeting and virtual events are not going to cut it. So I expect that there's going to be a bounce, a rebound out of this pandemic where people are going to travel. They're going to want to go to in-person events and concerts and hang out with their friends. We need to reestablish that because right now there's a lot of suffering. There's domestic violence, there's teen depression and suicide, and a lot of anxiety and loneliness out there because we can't get those social needs met. So I don't, if we made some temporary adjustments in the pandemic, I totally expect it to bounce back afterwards because it's really going back to our true hyper-social natures.
Yeah, because what was really interesting, we saw this sort of like a mini bump, right? So we work with primarily e-commerce businesses. We saw obviously a big bump in Black Friday, Cyber Monday, right? Probably amplified by the virtue of the fact that people couldn't physically get to the shops to kind of buy gifts, right? So they were gifting a lot of things. And what we found was that quite recently, obviously, there was a fairly significant uptick in spending, right? Because a lot of people in America got their stimulus checks, right? So all of a sudden, people are sitting on $1,400 that they never had before, right? And a lot of people were putting off purchases until that point, right? So again, we've kind of built it into our sort of workflow to say when that sort of, if there's another round of stimulus checks, expect there to be kind of like an uplift in kind of people's behavior.
Yeah, yes, you're absolutely right. I'd say that there are permanent trends. Like I said, our social natures aren't going to change, and we will rebound back to that. But if you're talking about adoption of e-commerce, for example, in the U.S. during the first 12 weeks after we started locking down, the growth in e-commerce was the same it has been in the previous decade. That's how quickly people moved over to online buying. So some things like that, the convenience of apps, online ordering. I mean, even if I go out of the house, I go to this Mexican chain called Chipotle, I order on my app. So all I have to do is walk into the store and grab the bag and leave. I don't actually wait for them to make my burrito.
Yes, I mean, things like, I go into, I go for a walk every day. I go to a gas station to kind of pick up a coffee, right? And on the machine, I can actually order my coffee from my phone. I don't physically need to touch the machine to get my coffee, right? And again,
Absolutely.
I built into the behavior. Like what I do is I take the first cup, throw that in the trash. I get the second cup to use. Get the first lid, throw that in the trash. Second lid, put that on my cup, right? Again, I mean, I'm probably being super paranoid about the kind of, the likelihood of picking up something off a kind of cup that somebody else might have touched. But it's just, I guess the psychology of the way in which people have been trained.
Yeah, it's a weird combination right now. As I mentioned, we have this need to be social, and isolation is really, really harmful to mental health. But on the flip side of that, especially with regarding the food and built-in into our evolutionary psychology, where we want to avoid things that might lessen our chances of survival. So it's a real kind of tension and tug of war between those two very basic evolutionary impulses right now.
So Tim, what I'm gonna do, I obviously love talking to you. I really look forward to the day when we get the opportunity to kind of sit and meet face to face and have some food and drinks and just kind of shoot the breeze, really. Because again, for me, like you say, like you and I are kind of like social people. We like to kind of meet up with others and kind of hang. And again, I mean, for me, it's really just been something that I've missed a lot, right? And I think in some respects, I've had to kind of turn to exercise and going out and trying to get some kind of space by walking and so on. What I'm going to do, I'm going to switch on kind of the chat overlay, which will give us the ability, if there's anyone watching, to kind of to come along and kind of ask questions if they have any. So if you have any questions for Tim, right, then by by all means, kind of sort of chime in.
Yeah, please do. Would love to answer your questions or to have you involved in the conversation.
But while we kind of wait for kind of people to come along and ask any questions, what I want to kind of know, Tim, is like, again, like I don't know if you're aware of the kind of the kind of spat that's going on between Apple and Facebook with the
Of course,
transparency, and I just wondered what your thoughts were around it in terms of, you know, how do you think it's going to impact people, both on the advertiser side, the publisher side, right, and the platforms, right? Because I mean, obviously the platforms themselves are relying on advertising, spending money. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's a very important question, I think, for our times. And I'm going to try to just provide a little bit of, well, this is just my own perspective and context for it. I think that we live in very dangerous times because AI and algorithms are driving much higher levels of polarization. A lot of that is based on information they know about us and they're fine tuning. And Facebook is one of the biggest culprits in that arena. So, I feel as online marketers, we want to have access to data. Data is good, and tailored, personalized campaigns. We see it overall as something positive. And I'm saying at a larger level, it may be a social bad to allow this degree of polarization and echo chambers and everything else. So in general, right now, I'm definitely leaning on the side of more privacy, and that's kind of the direction Apple is going in. They're basically saying it's going to be an opt-in model rather than an opt-out model on their devices.
I don't know about you. I mean, for me, the thing that bothers me about it's like it's a binary thing. It's either you have all of the data or you have none of the data. And really, it should just be you have enough data in which to make a kind of make the experience better for the person that you're talking to, right? Again, from the point of view of, you know, like, again, like you've got personalized ads and you following people around, right? So I think the problem has always been people have Facebook advertisers have relied on the ability to be able to follow people wherever they go, understand their behavior, and then model that behavior into an audience that they can then, you know, granularly target, right, with which to kind of get conversions. And because the conversions can take place over a longer attribution window, right, Facebook have been claiming credit for more sales than probably they have been necessarily involved in, right? And I always kind of like to say Facebook is almost like they're taking credit for, you know, if you bought a girl a drink in a bar and then 3 weeks later she met somebody else, you might still claim credit for introducing that person to that girl 3 weeks ago, right? Even though there's so much more has happened sort of subsequent to that, right? And for me, it's going to put Facebook on their toes, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing.
Well, I think that this is in a way overblown, because really Google is already moving towards restricting cookies and taking away any knowledge of who your audience is, and so we're a little bit in the dark again as online marketers. But at the same time, there's the ability to pull together, digital fingerprints by looking at a variety of things, the IP address you're coming from, the browser version you're using, and collect that into essentially an identity. So there's ways around this stuff. It's not as clean and universal.
Yeah. And I think if you look at it, I mean, like people that are involved in B2B marketing, I mean, historically, they've relied on firmographic information, right? So in other words, if somebody logs on from a computer and they're in Facebook's headquarters, just for argument's sake, the Facebook IP will show up that this is an employee of Facebook or Microsoft or whoever it happens to be. And because everyone is now working from home, right, all of a sudden, right, you've got this sort of situation where it's difficult to be able to establish whether somebody is, an employee of a company based upon their IP address, right? Because it's not flagging as that.
Yeah, and again, I know we're talking about media buying and all of that, but I'm trying to just balance this as a social good and looking at the corrosive effect of surveillance capitalism in general. And I find myself more and more being on the side of personal privacy. I think you should have a lockbox, and you should be able to say who you want to give your personal information to, and be able to revoke that on your end unilaterally without any of the company's involvement. Having said that, I don't think Apple is doing this altruistically. They're doing it because they can. They've always had a closed ecosystem, and so they're just pissing on Facebook. And the bigger problem is the fact that there's a profit motive and monopolies in the tech sector that are strip mining us. Apple just does it differently, so they can get away with doing this. But the problem is that
trying to kind of take back control of marketplaces, right? Because they obviously lost control of marketplaces because Facebook had a marketplace, right? And they wanted to kind of be the kind of the front and center on the iOS side of things for where that kind of revenue is kind of derived from, is through that sort of marketplace. So they've just tried to take that back. And yeah, I mean, I think if you look at it from the perspective of, are they trying to do good for end users? It's probably 60% for that, 40% commercial gains.
I'm more cynical. I would say it's mostly for commercial gain, and you basically, what gets measured gets done. And if what gets measured is making money, these companies are going to make money, and society be damned. I mean, I think we live in very scary times right now, and it's not clear at all, broadly speaking, that Western liberal democracies are going to survive. And authoritarianism doesn't happen overnight. It's going to be death by 1,000 cuts, and it's going to be self-serving companies and self-serving marketers like us just saying, that's my job and I'm just trying to personalize that campaign. Well, we really have to start thinking more about the ethics and the bigger picture, is what I believe.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with you, but again, I think there's a lot of small businesses that have done pretty well on the back of Facebook's sort of hyper granular, local based targeting that's going to go away, right? And it's kind of like, well, what are those small business owners going to turn to, right, as an alternative to Facebook's hyper local targeting to give them the ability to generate leads or sales for their kind of stores, right? And I don't.
And I know that, for example, Apple iPhone users I'll spend more money, but there's still the whole Android ecosystem. That clampdown hasn't happened on that side.
I mean, obviously, like with Google, I mean, they're looking at sort of rolling out the sort of, privacy sandbox, the federated learning, a cohort, some point in time in 2022, and obviously that will be the end of the sort of third-party cookie. And again, I think in some respects, it's almost like it's taking us all the way back to the beginning when sort of this digital advertising ecosystem first spawned and kind of created itself, right? I mean, I got involved in 2000, and it was very much a case of money was moving from TV, radio, and print, which was non-trackable, you couldn't actually attribute sales to specific individuals or what have you, right? To this very, very granular, targeted kind of proposition, right? Which was, for me, again, that's why so much money moved online, right? And I think in some respects, it's kind of like we're moving back to that. We're not going to be able to kind of target at a granular level, right? So we're going to rely on sort of good old-fashioned brand marketing, right? In some respects, I think.
Yeah, and I look at this on a larger scale as a kind of a bait and switch on the part of these companies. They gave you this control, they got you hooked on their products, and the advertisers are their customers, of course. And now they're saying, well, just trust us, we'll spend your money for you. Let's just keep doing this in the dark. Of course, that's to their advantage because there's no inspection, there's no transparency, and they're in complete control. And again, the root cause of this is the monopoly power and the fact that monopolies aren't being regulated. So in some cases they have more leverage than governments. I mean, I know in Europe you have that in Ireland, I believe, that compliance agency that's supposed to look out for privacy. Well, I think their funding is $30 million. A year. That's a joke. How can you enforce stuff against multi-billion-dollar monopolies with a tiny budget like that?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's like, let's lawyer up and kind of let's take this see how we get on. But again, I mean, I think what's quite interesting is that that statement of if you're not paying for the product, then you are the product, right? I mean, that's very, very true in this sort of advertising ecosystem. And again, I think the kind of the dichotomy is that you've got people that will say, yeah, I don't want to kind of like be sort of targeted at that granular level, so I'm going to opt out of personalized ads. So what's going to happen is that publishers that are giving people content for free, right, all of a sudden are going to say, well, we need to kind of make our money, right? We used to make it through ad revenue. We're not going to make as much money from ad revenue. So we need to try and find a way of doing it. So I think what you're going to see is that a lot more companies are going to introduce paywalls, right? So they're going to have sort of like content silos. They're going to say, you want to see our content or you play our games or whatever it is, you got to pay for it, right? And that's going to sort of put everyone's kind of backs up as far as, well, I got this for free and why am I having to pay for it?
Well, and again, for what do you get for free? John Marshall, I don't know if you know him, but a friend of mine, he just wrote a great book about the history of the free internet and why it's not so wonderful. So look that up, John Marshall's new book. But think about it. If I would rather go back, for example, to authoritative news sources. I pay for the New York Times, for example, because it's one of the clean, legitimate sources of news left in the U.S. So I'm happy to do that instead of having anybody, including their conspiracy-minded uncle, being able to put stuff out there and again have it even be amplified by social media. So I think in a way we need a retrenchment, this personalized level of communication. Just because you have a Twitter account doesn't mean I should listen to you. You know what I mean? So I think we need to dampen some of the stupid voices and the uneducated voices. I know that sounds really bad, but I would rather have professional journalists and people that are based in some kind of ethics doing stuff. So as far as that goes,
again, I think if you look at it, a lot of the kind of the media publishers, they've changed their model, right? So now if you go to some of these sites, they're sort of the kind of the publisher quality of the content that's being created is really poor, but really it's just another kind of like page that they can add like ad blocks to, right? And and
exactly.
It's a tiny kind of article that's kind of got a very clickbaity headline, right? A couple of pictures, right? And then all of a sudden there's like a whole raft of ads, right? And again, that's obviously been designed to make money for the publisher, but at the expense of the experience that consumers actually have, right? And
well, it's not just I would say not just the consumer experience, but the larger way society operates. It's a mile wide and an inch deep. Now we don't look at anything. We just click on stuff. We don't think about anything. We don't actually read anymore, digest information, or consider alternative points of view. So that, like I said, there's a larger corrosive effect on the ability of society to function that I think is also being overlooked.
Yeah. So in terms of like, I mean, again, like, so like in the sort of short to medium term future, I mean, where are you going to be in the sort of short to medium future as far as speaking and stuff like that? Have you got more sort of live events planned in terms of speaking engagements?
Yeah, that's a great question. The next one I have live happens to be here in San Diego for the Young Presidents Organization, an executive gathering. Then I have another one in September in Las Vegas for the e-tourism summit. So I think live events in the U.S. are starting to come back. But because of 6 to 12 month lead times for most event organizers, I think it'll be a year from now, next spring, that we really see large scale business conferences again.
Yeah, because it's quite interesting. I remember I actually went to New York when just after Hurricane Katrina, the one that sort of battered New York. Was it Katrina or?
I don't remember, but I know the one you're talking about.
Anyway, there was an event in New York called AdTech, right? I went to AdTech in New York, right? And basically, like a hurricane had been through. Apparently, a lot of the exhibitors had pulled out, right? So basically, AdTech put the show on, but there was a tiny number of people went, right? A lot of exhibitors didn't go, right? And a lot of people just turned up with a table and a kind of hand-printed plaque saying, "We're still here, even though our booth is kind of like under the 10 foot." Right? But that show never recovered, right? They never ever recovered from that particular event happening. And I think the reason that it didn't was, most of the exhibitors rebooked the show for the following year at the show that they're at. And it's all derived from the success they have of talking to, attendees, right? And obviously the attendee rate probably at 20% what it was, right? And the exhibitor rate being at 20% what it was, right? There just wasn't the kind of the rebooking for the following year. So although they put the show on, right, it just didn't kind of get back to where it should have been, right, or where it was before.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I think
yeah, as I said, I ran this international conference series and chaired it for 10 years. And I always joke that running a professional services firm is the second hardest business model in the world. The hardest is live events, because there are all of these external timing things and collisions with other events, and what's happening in the larger world that you really have no control over at all. So yeah, it's not an easy time to be in the event organizer business, that's for sure.
Even putting on things like this, I mean, I know that there's like a whole raft of other sort of webinar live event things like we're doing here on at the same time, right? I mean, 10 o'clock Eastern, 10 o'clock Pacific time, 6 o'clock UK time is prime time for kind of when a lot of these things take place, right? I mean, I got invited to probably 6 or 7 other things on at exactly this time, right? And it's the same thing. You do Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And I work on the basis that, the content, once you've actually created the content, it's there for perpetuity, right? So people can kind of pick things off. And again, we can kind of go through the conversation after the event and sort of break it down into the component chunks and say, well, we talked about this and then we talked about this. And I think, so much of that success will come from what you do kind of pre, during, and post. And really the pre and the post are the two bits that will really kind of tell you whether you've actually done a good job when you're actually creating this type of content, right? And
yeah, it's sort of like before, when in the movie industry you have to have a big opening day, and then you had your rights to stream it on the streaming platforms and international distribution. Now it's moved to much more of you just license it, and then you hope that over time things trickle in. There's no more big launches. I think it's much harder to do splashy big launches of any kind right now.
No, definitely. So it's okay. So in terms of like in terms of the media buying world, because obviously this particular show is really kind of aimed at people that are involved in media buying, right?
Yes.
What are the sort of biggest challenges you see sort of facing media buyers these days? What are the kind of biggest mistakes that you sort of look at when you kind of come across people?
Well, one of the things that a lot of my agency and large branded friends have been talking about is essentially double dipping by Google. That you have to pay for access to your own brand. I mean, arguably, if you rank well in the search engines for your own brand, then having to bid on it against your competitors doesn't really add a lot of value. It's just a defensive move. So I've seen some interesting technology that actually removes that cannibalization. When your competitors are bidding on your branded word, you defend it, but then you take it offline, so you're not letting Google just get a free ride off of this huge ad spend on your branded terms when you don't need to defend them. So your SEO listing rises to the top, and you're going to get the click anyway without paying for it. So that's some cool technology. If anyone wants to reach out to me, I'll be glad to tell them about that.
Cool. And in terms of like, the kind of the changes that are going to sort of move ahead. I mean, where do you see the sort of, if you were going to project forward like 12 months from now, what is the kind of the ecosystem going to look like in terms of, will we be completely back to normal? Will we come back in kind of lockdown again? Right. I mean, again, I think so many people are freaking out.
I think there's going to be increasing political pressure to regulate these large marketplaces and monopolies. So I think that the reason they're taking away some of these controls and the personalization is a response to that. And I think that's a long-term trend. The US is more of a crazy cowboy Wild West situation. Europe takes privacy seriously, but still, I mean, GDPR is not that strong, and it's certainly not being enforced uniformly. So I think there's going to be an increasing demand from people to control their data, and governments and politicians are going to start paying attention to that. So some of these moves to remove the individual knowledge are just preemptive on the part of these companies, so they don't get regulated externally. So I think that trend's still going to happen.
Yeah, because I remember way back in sort of the halcyon days of ringtones and things like that, there was a kind of an affiliate network that basically paid the Florida Attorney General $1 million to go and look at somebody else, right? Said, like, they just basically gave them money money to kind of like go away, right, and go and look at what other people were doing rather than what they were doing, right? Which the Florida Attorney General obviously needed to hire more people, so they took the money graciously and were thank you very much and moved on and basically kicked the ass off of some other company instead. And again, I mean, I think money talks. Will I think, as you say, I think GDPR is one of those. A principle basis, it seems like a good thing, right? The reality of the way in which it's been sort of executed and implemented, again, like you can go to any website and like virtually every single website is not really complying with GDPR, and the ones that are kind of trying to do it again. I've seen whenever I've been in America, right, I'm trying to access a website in the UK, right, which is important to me, right, because I'm from the UK. I just basically you're from America, we're not interested in talking to you at all, right, because and you're thinking, well, that's not really the best way that I've seen people handle how you actually deal actually asking for permission to kind of like show the content that people are looking for. But that's kind of by the by. And in terms of like the future for like smaller businesses, I mean, because again, I think the big businesses, they're publicly traded, they have an obligation to their shareholders foremost, right? And then obviously, I think kind of it sort of filters down from there. But I think small businesses, how do you see small businesses kind of getting back into the game, right? Based upon, again, I'm not really sure how many small businesses are going to come back in the UK. I mean, even though we're coming out of lockdown Monday, in theory, we can be indoors and stuff like that. I just don't know how much business is going to be there, how many people are going to go back into work, right? Because, it's just unknown.
Yeah, I would say there's actually the small businesses in terms of online marketing and media buying are going to have a much harder time, to your point. Like I was saying earlier, large companies can collect a digital fingerprint across a variety of platforms and technologies and marry that up with third-party data and use their business intelligence unit to figure things out and essentially reverse engineer some of this information that they're going to be losing from the platforms. Small businesses can't do that at all. And frankly, the platforms don't care about small businesses because they don't spend enough money. So they were never the target audience. So the small businesses are always going to be at the little kids table. They're not the main customers of these platforms.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the because I know obviously when you had the Black Lives Matter, like last July, there was a kind of protest. A lot of big advertisers basically shut off their advertising Facebook through the month of July, right, last year, and that clearly, would have had some impact on the overall performance of Facebook in terms of overall performance. I think the fact that it was like in the summer months, summer lull, right, probably wasn't as detrimental as it might have been if it was in October or round about sort of Black Friday, Cyber Monday. I mean, sometimes it's almost like it's a bit of tokenism. They're just doing it just to kind of make a point rather than doing it because they really feel it. I think again, and it's difficult. I mean, if you're a big brand, right, that relies on sales, right, you have to kind of like deliver sales. Otherwise, you're in trouble. Taking a principled stand is always going to be the kind of the right way of doing that.
Well, and again, I think that companies are wrestling with it this worldwide because consumers do have a voice now, and they can say things on social media. There's no such thing as a company that can avoid the fallout. I think the smartest thing companies can do is to pick a tribe whose loyalty you want and be loyal to that tribe. I think the hardest thing is to be a generic brand, a Coca-Cola or a Sony, where basically every person on the planet might be your customer. But I think it's actually an opportunity for some companies to say, this is what we stand for and this is what we stand against, because they're going to increase that kind of tribal evolutionary group cohesion with their audience and make those people advocates for them. And forget the other people that are against you. That's okay. They're going to say mean things. So I think there's a room for a company with a point of view and a clear stance on things.
Yeah. So, Tim, I was going to run for about 45 minutes. We're coming up on that now. If somebody wanted to kind of get hold of you, I mean, like again, I know that obviously you've got your book, right? And people can buy the book. So where can we go to buy the book? First off.
Yeah, well, you can go to primalbrain.com for everything related to the book and my evolutionary psychology topics. That also has links from there to the new LinkedIn Learning neuromarketing course that I mentioned. So if you're on LinkedIn Learning, just type in neuromarketing in the search, you'll find it. If you're interested in digital marketing consulting or training or keynote speaking or anything related to that side of the house, just go to timash.com. timash.com. So I'm very easy to find. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. That's always a good place.
Well, Tim, thank you so much for being my inaugural guest on this show, and I'm hoping at some point in time I can kind of have you back. Once again, what I want to do is I want to get somebody to kind of do the production. I want to get kind of like get my internet in order so I have a much faster connection, permanent connection, so that I don't sort of buffer and everything else, right? Because I know I was very jealous of seeing your high speed internet when you posted that on Facebook the other day. I was like, wow, why can't I have speed like that?
Yeah,
right?
gigabit fiber is a pretty cool thing.
Yeah, well, we're a long way from here in the UK. But yeah, but you know, again, I thank you so much for kind of being a guest. I really can't wait till we get the opportunity to kind of meet up in person once more and go out and have some food somewhere, right? I don't know. I thought one point in time we met in Australia. I've heard recently that the Prime Minister of Australia has basically said they're not going to open up their borders for foreign travel or foreign people until the middle of next year, right? So
yeah, they're not even letting their own citizens back in from India, so at all. I mean, never mind quarantining their own citizens. So yeah, Australia is pretty locked down at the moment. But Jim, it's been my honor and my pleasure. And next time I see you, you're definitely getting a big hug from me.
Oh, definitely. Again, I had my second dose of Pfizer on Tuesday, just gone. Right, so I'm now fully vaccinated. Like the guy that did it, basically, one, he nicked a blood vessel, so that I had a big sort of spurt of blood out my arm. But apart from that, he said like in like a week to 2 weeks time, you'll be bulletproof, right? And I'm thinking, hey, I'm not bulletproof, but I'll kind of settle for that. And like you, I'm a big hugger. I like hugging people, and that's something I've definitely missed as a part of this process. So yeah. Again, I'm all for hugging kind of friends, and yeah, I look forward to that opportunity. Hopefully, again, I renewed my global entry a couple of days ago, right? So again, I'm kind of getting to the point where I'm thinking, well, you know, I think Joe Biden is due to come to the UK sometime, I think in the middle of June, right? So I'm hoping at that point in time they'll have this announcement to basically say, the UK and US, you can travel there, we can travel there, blah, 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 right? And then hopefully that at that point in time, some of the events that I've spoken at in the past will decide to kind of put on their shows, right? Again, I've spent all my time walking, losing weight, right? Not going out.
Yeah, and you look great, by the way.
And equipment. Oh, thank you. Appreciate that. But yeah, I mean, like, for me, it's really just like, I did it because it was more of a, you know, I just knew I needed to, right? My knees and hips and joints were just killing me. So I just thought, you know what? It's become, again, like something that's become a habit for me that I enjoy doing, right? To get out and get fresh air to the head. I mean, I went out this morning, it was raining. Doesn't matter. I'm going to go out anyway. So,
Exactly.
But yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time. And hopefully at some point in time, in the not too distant future, I'll have a producer that can actually do the production and I can just focus on, you know, talking. And we'll kind of see where we go from there. So thanks so much for being on, Tim. And,
yeah, it's been my honor to be your inaugural guest. Thanks, Jim.
Great, and we'll talk soon. And thanks everyone for listening in. If you haven't already kind of you know, found a way to talk, hook up with Tim, he told you how to get in touch with him. And obviously with me, obviously you know who I am because you came through the Facebook group, LinkedIn Live, Twitter, or the other one. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But yeah, the plan is that we're going to go live every Thursday at 10 o'clock Pacific time, which is 6 o'clock UK time, 1 p.m. Eastern. My guest next week is actually going to be Manu Singer, who is the kind of founder of Stack Marketer, right? I don't know if you know Manu at all, but again, he's one of the guys who, again, really, really sort of great guy. He had me on his show a couple of times, and I was like just delighted to kind of have him on as a guest for this show. So yeah, I mean, look forward to talking to you all next week. And Tim, thank you again so much. Really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Oh, it's my absolute pleasure, my friend. Take care.
Bye.